I had no idea all these things of insecurity and abandonment and fear and loneliness and isolation and not being good enough and not being having to prove this is me, not my parents. Constantly feeling like I had to prove that they made the right choice, that it wasn't a bad investment, that they got the return on their investment.
Who am I?
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 This is Who Am I, Really? A podcast about adoptees that have located and connected with their biological family members. I'm Damon Davis, and you're about to meet Santo, who called me from Reading, Pennsylvania. Santo navigated his adoption knowing his birth family was in Italy and that he had some siblings who could have been adopted with him. When a lifelong friend's wedding took him to Europe, Santo saw the opportunity to drive a full day to stand face to face with his birth family. Santo's documentary about his life is called Il Mio Posto a Tavola, or My Place at the Table. This is Santo's journey. Santo was raised as an only child in his family. We dove right in with his earliest memories of being told he was adopted.
The first thing I remembering is being told that I was adopted. I think I was about 4 years old. And my parents explained general terms in a way that a 4-year-old could understand, that they weren't able to have children of their own, but they wanted to have children, and they picked me, and I was special, and I was like, "Are you going to give me back?" And they were like, "No, you're just like Jimmy next door, my best friend growing up, still a dear friend." They said, "Forever, you're ours forever." I'm like, "All right, can I go back and play now?"
Yeah, classic.
Right? And that was the extent of the trauma at that time. It was in many ways, I guess it was normal. Italian family, Sunday dinners at the grandparents, surrounded by love and loudness and people and food. But school was difficult for me because probably from kindergarten to 10th grade at least, I was constantly bullied.
Really?
And so I had 6 hours of, that harassment, and then 18 hours of great. And it scares me how bullying now can be 24/7 because of the internet.
Yeah.
And I don't know how kids get through it. I only got through it because of my folks and because of the family, the extended family that we had of love and support. And so I got through it, but I don't know how kids do it.
Yeah.
So my dad was a musician. He was a postal worker clerk, but that was his day job. But he had a band. He always had a band when I was growing up. So I would go to rehearsals, or he would rehearse at the house, or he'd play for shows, musicals in the community or beyond. And so our connection was music, because I wasn't a sports guy at all. And he was a Eagles fan, Sixers fan, Phillies fan.
Yeah.
But it never stopped him from connecting with me. My dad was my biggest fan.
And you were a musician also? Is that right?
Yeah.
To a degree, like music.
I play piano and guitar, but piano a little bit better than guitar.
Gotcha.
And he taught me what I know about music, and if I would have practiced, could have been maybe better.
That's awesome. Really cool.
Yeah,
how about you with your mom?
She was very feisty, and we often hit heads, and she loved me extremely, and she was my protector too. If I came home from school and I was crying because I got beat up or bullied, it was hugs or it was whatever they could do. And my mom had some challenges growing up. She had to stop school when she was in 10th grade to take care of her younger brother, and never really had her own life. And so I think that affected some stuff with her. And she had a good sense of humor. She could laugh at herself.
Yeah.
And I would poke at her. It's like, "Mom, did you just say that?" She's like, "Oh, shut up." And her shut up meant like, you're right. I'm not going to give you that, but you're right.
Right. You got me, and shut up.
Yeah, because I'm still a mom.
Yeah.
And I grew up as an only child, even though my parents had offered to adopt my older brother and sister that we knew about in Italy.
Really?
Yeah, and the parents decided to keep them. They wanted to keep us all together. Well, we'll find in our discussion that wasn't the whole story. That was my parents, Anna and Sam, who from Pennsylvania, told me everything they knew, which wasn't too much. I knew older brother, older sister birth dates, and that the parents decided to keep them. Otherwise, they would have adopted the three of us.
That is fascinating. Wow.
Yeah, but we'll find
So,
more to the story. Yeah.
yeah, and as these stories often do, there's more rich detail. So I'll be glad to get to that in a minute.
Good.
So I would love to know more about any times in your life when adoption curiosity came up for you. Because one of the things that you've just said is that you were told that you had older siblings. I'd love to know what you thought about that and the natural idea of being separated from these siblings that you don't even know.
Yeah. Adolescence, yay, right? All kinds of things go on. And even as I was growing up alone as an only child, I had always wished for an older brother to protect me, beat up my bullies, whatever kids think of at that point. In adolescence, it got more serious about that desire, but more about the curiosity. And I started looking for siblings. And if I found my birth parents, that would be great too. But I think part of that was not wanting to hurt or offend or make my folks, my adoptive parents, feel insecure or feel concerned that I was going to find my birth family and leave them or whatever. But it sounds irrational, but as many of we know that our adoptive parents go through a lot as well, and there's some trauma there. And so I always deferred to my parents. How would it feel for them? How would it be for them? And so I was pretty careful. So I started searching through college. It took me about 5 years to come up with enough information. And that wasn't easy because the state or the church wasn't really open to giving information. I remember going to a meeting with Catholic Social Services, and the file was this big, and they pulled out one sheet of paper, and they told me whatever was on that sheet of paper, which was mostly a narrative about how irresponsible my birth parents were and how they didn't take care of, they didn't take responsibility seriously, they didn't parent well, very judgmental, right? And eventually getting through the congressman, the church, the consulate, I had an opportunity to go to a wedding of a grade school, high school friend who lived in Spain and went over 2 weeks earlier and drove from Madrid to Genoa by myself without a phone.
Wow.
Back at 85.
Before we get too far, though, I want to know more about your thoughts about what the possibilities were. What did you think about your siblings living there while you're living here? What, you said you always wanted protectors, but did you have moments of contemplation where you thought more deeply to yourself, like, wait, why am I here and they're there? How does this make sense and why?
I gave everybody a pass. I felt so grateful my whole life because I knew what my life would have been like, because I had imagined that my birth parents gave me up because of economics. That was my story. They couldn't keep me. I didn't take it personally. I didn't think, oh, they're terrible people. They did the best for me. I'm very grateful. My parents here in Pennsylvania are doing everything, gave me everything I need and most of what I wanted. And who are you to complain? Who are you to whine about what you don't have? So I've tried to live in that life of gratitude. I guess what I realized only maybe in the last few years is the other things about adoption that got in my way for 40 some years or more. Because reunions don't really do anything other than connect us to people, which is a good thing. I have absolutely no regrets. I'm so glad I met them, but it didn't change the impact of adoption on me. And so I was very grateful, and I was curious, and I was hoping they were okay, and I wanted to meet them and get to know them. But I focused more on what I had, and it was really curiosity that was pushing me forward, not some big missing, not some void. Or at least that's as a teen and as a young adult, that's what felt I was motivated by.
When you reach a point of actually taking action, you've said that you went to, I think you said, the Catholic Church, to Catholic Social Services, and you saw this thick file that had all of your information in it that was very detailed. There's a moment that drives you to even go to Catholic Social Services. Tell me about this final burning or curiosity, because you've also said you were, for lack of better words, loyal to your family, right? You didn't want to disrupt the adoptive family that you were in. You were grateful for the things that you had lived in your life. So you weren't necessarily starving to go find something, but there had to be a curiosity that linked you to the next step, which is, let me track down where Catholic Social Services is. Let me make an appointment. Let me ask them to go find the file. Tell me about the lead up to this and these feelings of finally taking action to go talk to the Catholic Social Services.
So I'm a Taurus. I'm really stubborn. I'm perseverant. When I have something in my head, I usually get it done. And what was driving me at that point was this: who am I? Who do I look like? Who are these people? There's a part of me in 5,000 miles away. I want to know. Not even just as much at that point for medical reasons, as much as for making me feel more of a whole person, because there's too much that was unspoken or unknown. And as I said, my parents told me everything they knew, but they weren't told a lot, because I knew the system. I was around the church a lot. I was a sacristan. I was a altar server, all these things. So I knew how the church worked. And I knew that the laws were at the time, that they were still very closed and it would be very difficult to get information. But I was like, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm going to focus on chipping away each meeting, each letter, and I've saved them. Each phone call got me closer to getting enough information to make the decision that when I went to Spain that I was going to go and search.
Wow, that's fascinating. So what did the sheet, you said the sheet basically said your biological family had been irresponsible. It characterized them in a way that allowed the church to have an excuse for removing you from the home. It sounds like they had documented what they believed, or at least had fabricated, was the reason for your adoption. So you've now gotten this information. What is your next step?
So that first meeting didn't give me anything content-wise. It gave me tone. It gave me context. It gave me picture. It really was a very sobering incident that said, this is going to be rough to get anything. This is not going to be an easy task. And that's why it took 5 years. And so through different, like the congressman, the consulate, all these different places, then I got a little bit more information, a little bit more. Now, you have to remember, this was 1985. So it was such a different world then. You had to wait to get a letter back. You didn't have email. You didn't have a cell phone. You called long distance, all these things.
No internet searches, no public records online.
No.
Yeah. So you go through this old school detective work. You utilize the public servants who are available to you. And what is the first piece of information that gave you a clear destination in Spain to go to?
So once I had birth dates and names, I knew my sister's first name. I knew her birthday. I knew my brother's first name and his birthday, older. We were all born in the orphanage.
Really?
Parents could not afford. In some cases, I think they were taken and put in the orphanage. But in Italy, there was, I don't know if you've heard the term, like the home for wayward girls in the United States. Well, it was a similar thing in an orphanage in Italy is called orfanotrofio. But the place that I was born in an orphanage and then moved to the Brefotrofio, which is this place for essentially illegitimate kids.
Uh,
Because my bio parents had not been married. The father had been married before. There was no divorce in Italy, but in fact, they lived together for 45 years. So they were all but married. And so we couldn't get the name of the father. So we had the mother's name, but I didn't have the mother's name. She did not consent to give her name, which is what I was told, which is what was on my birth certificate, which I've seen. So we could probably find somebody who's born on this date with this first name. And I'm like, all right, let's go with that. Let's try that.
wow. Yeah, that's, I mean, next to nothing. And sorry, I may have said Spain before I meant Italy.
Well, no, I did. The reason you said I probably is because I was in Madrid for this wedding and then drove to Italy 21 hours by myself. I would never do that today, even with a cell phone.
It was 1985, and Santo's childhood friend was getting married in Spain. Santo decided he would travel to Europe a week early with a plan to rent a cheap vehicle to make the long drive from Spain to the small town where he was born in Italy. Mind you, with no cell phone and no smartphone maps. His rental car was a stick shift, but Santo admitted,
I didn't drive standard transmission very well at all. And I had a stick shift, and it was the only cheap car to rent. And so I remember driving away from their village near Madrid. And she told me later, her fiance said to her, are we going to ever see him again? Because I was driving like a bucking Bronco like this going out of the town. And he's like, oh my goodness. Like, no worries. He's fine. I know him.
21 hours of driving later, Santo somehow arrived at the consulate in Genoa, Italy. It was late on a Friday afternoon, and his instructions from the staff were to head to Aosta, the town where he was born, the following Monday. He was directed to ask for Senora Poisson.
They said, this woman will help you. I'm like, to myself, why would she help me? It's against the law. She can't do anything. And I was ready to come back to Madrid. I called my friend. She said, do not come back now. You're like, even if you don't find anything, you're there. You'll regret if you don't try. Another friend who was here in the States called her, two of my closest friends. And I said the same thing. She said the same thing. No, you have to do it.
Yeah. You're there. Get it done. Do as much as you can.
Right. So I go down to Arezzo, which is closer to Rome. I took a train down because God knows I wasn't driving that way. I went up one-way streets the wrong way. The got him in there. He's like, "You're gonna make a crash." He's like, "No, dude, you didn't give me a ticket." He's like, "I'm worried for you." So I go down.
You're a public safety hazard.
Which hasn't really changed much, but
yeah, right.
I'm still. So I go down, spend this time with a friend who had come to the States for a few times, so I knew him and stay with him. We had a nice weekend. He's the same thing. Come down, we'll just spend the weekend. So I go back up on Monday, and I drive the hour and 10 minutes from Genoa to Aosta, and get to this municipio, which is like the town hall of the comune,
like municipal.
The comune, which is the town. And I go upstairs, and there's this woman, and she says, Senora Poisson. You remember the big, well, I'm old, but they had these computers with the big cathode ray tubes, and there was monochrome screens, right?
Yeah, I'm older than I look. I know what you're talking about.
Okay. So it was green letter, whatever.
The monochrome, yeah.
So she's looking around because there's other people in the office. And she's typing in, she's looking around. She starts writing on this piece of paper. She hands it to me, and it's the address of where they live, because she plugged in the birth dates and the first names.
Wow.
So I'm crying, she's crying, we're hugging.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. So I walked down to this place, and it was a high rise, kind of what would appear to be like maybe public housing in the States. It was a high rise. The lobby door, though, was locked. So I go for a walk. I knew where I was going. I was looking for the orphanage or where these nuns were that were taking care of the babies. And I met this Suore Natalia, and she said, "Oh yeah, I remember you." And I had a mustache. I'm like, "Wait, I was 1 when I left. I don't think you remember." I didn't say that, but maybe
Right.
she probably remembered the story. And she was a major figure in this whole thing in Italy about which babies got adopted, which
Wow.
not a not well, I won't disparage anything. So I go
But what
back.
I hear you saying, though, without saying it, is she was part of the engine that was
Yes,
moving the children out of the country.
yes.
So you're standing face to face with this woman.
I didn't know that then. I
Yeah,
know. I
and
yeah.
that's really fascinating. Wow. Go ahead.
So yeah, I go back, and I had also talked to somebody else at the region. The regione is like our county system, whereas the comune was the town.
Mhm.
And she said to me, "Oh, I know your situation. You're better off. You have a great life. Just go home." And I was like, "Thank you." And I was okay. I'm going back to the house now because
Yeah, right.
I had
Thank
everything I
you. I'm
needed.
not going home.
Yeah. So I go back. It's like all these people that have all this power and control over things they shouldn't have. That's really that I should have power and control over. Whom I look like, who are my parents, who are my siblings. I should know that. I
What
should.
your lived experiences are. Yes.
So I go back, and of course, the door is open.
Hmm.
Weird, right? But I don't believe in coincidences. I believe I wasn't ready to go the first time an hour before that. So I go in, and I knew they were on the second floor. I'm in the stairwell for 45 minutes, going up, going down, going up, going down. Should I go? Should I? Right? I'm like, oh my gosh. So I go, and the woman comes by with grocery bags. And do you remember South Pacific, the musical?
Vaguely, yes.
All right. Well, there was a character called Bloody Mary. It was a short, stout woman, sun-baked skin, long hair, right? This person looked like that. So my pretty clumsy Italian, I said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for Signora Agostino." And she goes, "That's me." I'm like, "Hello, my name is, I'm from the United States. I was born in Italy, in Aosta in 1960. I'm your son." And she's like, "No." And I'm like, "You have a son, Domenico, and his birthday. You have a daughter, Francesca, and her birthday. You have." So she goes, "Venica, Venica." So she takes me into her apartment. She shows me this picture of a 7-year-old. She said, "This is you." I said, "No, that's not me. I left when I was 1." And I'm thinking to myself, "Oh shit, I'm in the wrong house." I'm like, I'm destroying somebody's life, which was not my point or my intent. My intent was to find truth and find answers, and that you can't throw a baby away and never have to deal with it again, is what my mindset was then. I know better, differently now. So I said, "No, I left when I was 1." She goes, "Oh," like the skeletons from the closet came out. She calls Francesca, Venequa, "Come here." My I found was my sister comes out. She goes, "Mom, who is this?" She says, "Your brother." She said, "Michael?" She said, "No, the other one, another one." Because my older brother was 2, my sister was 1 and when I was born. So they were too young to know that there was another baby.
Wow. Yeah.
And she forgot about me. So I thought she forgot, but there's more. So instant acceptance. It was weird to be in her space. I felt very awkward. With my siblings, completely connected right away, and they did too. And we talked about that later in the film. And so I stayed there a week in a hotel because I one separate space. It was too much. It was really too much to process. I was by myself, and it's like, so something new, adoptee doing something by himself, right? This is where you,
Adopting, diving in off the deep end, unprepared in a foreign land. You know,
yeah, that's okay,
totally on brand for an adoptee adventure, right?
right? exactly. And when I learned in the research process, my director and I, it's like how many adoptees are doing these kinds of things by themselves with such courage. It's like, where do we get that from?
Yeah. As you were speaking, I tend to think in images, and the image that came to mind for me was adoptees being cliff divers, right? You're just standing there at the end and you just go, here we go. And you just jump, right? I mean, that's the image that came to mind. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I spent a week with them and it was great. It was wonderful. And then when I met extended family and they're like, so you're going to move here? And I'm like, no, my family's in the United States.
All right.
Well, aren't you like, well, I'm very grateful that my parents gave me up and did what turned out to be the best gift for me because I had a wonderful life. I have a wonderful life. So that was the kind of a weird part of it. And I've all the time because I'm already feeling a little bit guilty because I didn't tell my parents what I was doing. Because what if I didn't find them? What if my mom would have been freaking out knowing that I was driving across Europe by myself. No need to worry them, right?
Yeah.
I
And what if he does find her? How am I going to feel? When am I going to find out? He's not going to be back for 2 weeks, right?
Right.
Like, how do I? Yeah, that would have been tough. I could see why you didn't.
Yeah. So went to the wedding, everything, and of course I did have a little problem with the fender of the car, but that's parking was not my strength either. So I got back, and on the way back, I told my mom. I said I was able to find my siblings, and I also met their parents. So everything was framed around the search was for my siblings to get to know them. Every time for the next 30 years, I would talk about when my finding my siblings. I talked to my sister, brother. I never, it was not like I talked to my bio mom and blah, 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 blah. I felt awkward because I was starting to really question what was going on, what happened exactly.
Are you saying that as you spoke with your adoptive mother, you owned the biological relationship, but you didn't it doesn't sound like you were overbearing with it. You kept the separation of, I heard you say, I spoke to their parents, their mother kind of thing when you were talking to your adoptive parents.
Correct.
Yeah. Can I pause also right there because you said I met their parents. Did you also meet your biological father while on this trip?
Yes.
Were your parents together?
Yes.
Is that right? So you have full blood siblings in that Italian family, and how many were adopted out?
The three of us of the five were adopted.
Is
But
that right?
the older two they tried to take them away from my mother and father. And I called her the birth mother for years, and maybe until this past year.
Why?
My birth mother, because I was so angry.
Really?
And I didn't know why I was angry. Every time I met the birth mother, my birth mother, I liked her less. She was gruff. She was mean. She was angry. And I didn't understand it. And I just thought she was just miserable. She treated my sister terribly. And there's this, if I ever do a narrative film, there'll be the scene on the intersection where she and I are yelling, and my Italian got pretty good, and back and forth. I'm telling her, I didn't come to see you. I came to see my siblings. You treated her like dirt, and da 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 da. It was
Wow.
so. She told me when she first met me, my birth mother said that they told me you died. I didn't believe her because I had all these records, or I had all this information from the church that I had been so devoted to as a kid. And then we find out in the research process, I read the narratives. They said the parents came to visit the older brother, the older sister, but they didn't want to see the younger me, which kept confirming the story that I've been told, that they didn't want me. I thought it was, they had no resources to care for me. And now in the last 2 years, the story became, they didn't want him. They didn't recognize him, and they didn't want him. They didn't want to see him. And so now I'm like, And then we find out what really happened was my birth mother had some difficulty with the delivery. The umbilical was wrapped around my neck, so I was in a, what do you call it for babies, incubator,
Mm-hmm.
a couple months, and she was put out with the Medicaid back then. Like, you were out for a day or two. She was knocked out for 2 or 3 days. Wakes up and they tell her, "I'm sorry, Asunta, your baby died." And she was, what are you talking about? He was fine. He was that. No, he died. He died.
Unreal.
And the 60 Minutes feature that was done in October affirms all the stuff. Maria Lorino, who wrote The Price of Children, did a lot of research. And it's interesting because everything they say, my parents, Anna and Sam, paid $475 for me in 1961, which was like $5,000 back then, which was a heck of a lot of money.
Mm.
I think my dad's salary was like 20,000 a year.
Jeez.
So that was a big deal.
Quarter of his pay, right?
Right. And I never knew why he said, growing up, he was like, "Oh, my kid's my best investment I ever made." And I
Because
was
there
like,
was literally a receipt for the purchase, right?
yeah,
Oh, that's so fascinating. Wow.
yeah. So I see why she was so angry, because they tried to take the older two. They were trying to adopt my sister to Venice and my older brother to England.
And when you say they, be clear about who you mean.
The Brefa Trophy or the Orphanatrophy. Now, when I asked who they was, I get that it was from the church, says it was a state because they only managed the orphanage. Our intent was never to bash anybody in this story of making this film. I didn't want this to be a Dateline. I didn't want it to be an expose. It was telling my story as truthfully and authentically as possible. And then you decide. And it was also about the hope and the healing piece that I was looking for, but I was also hoping my siblings would get, because all four of my parents are deceased. I would have done this if Anna and Sam, my parents, if they were still alive, because while they may have gotten it here, I don't think they would have been able to process it here. They were there.
It's cognitively, you can understand it, but in your heart, it's very hard to reconcile.
Yeah.
Let me ask for your candor and your transparency here. This is really fascinating. And I know that religious institutions have been part of the engine that has driven a lot of adoptions. And the 60 Minutes piece, I'll link it in the show notes, is eye-opening in terms of the way that third parties describe the machinery that was traversing the country looking for children to take and transport into a different life, and that there was money to be made from it. So I appreciate you sharing. But I want to go back to your birth mother for a moment. When you first met her, you're standing there in her apartment with your sister, and she's showing you a picture that could have been you, but it's not. It's a brother of yours. I'm wondering about this moment when she realizes, oh, you're the other baby.
Yeah.
Was there any level of emotion for her for this baby that she thought was deceased now standing before her? Was there any emotion for you? How was this moment of actually realizing, oh, I've got the right woman, and she realizes it's me?
I felt empathy. I couldn't understand it. I've never been a parent, dog parent, but I felt the empathy, that how this must have been for her. I remember she took me shopping to a very fancy men's store that she had a tailored shirt made for me. I knew it was fancy because they gave you extra cuffs. This is right. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. I'll have the shirt, and then probably can't fit in it, and then a tie. And I grew up with Italians who don't say "I love you" every second of the day. They buy you things. They do things for you. They show up. They're there. And so that was really familiar to me that this must be her
Her
way.
love language.
Yeah, this is her way of saying, "I'm so glad. I love you." And she did laugh and smile at time. At that first meeting was good. As I said, it devolved later because I don't know, because it may have gotten more difficult and more shameful. It may have been more confronting to her because the younger two siblings were also either taken away or given up. And one was 7 when he left, when he was taken. And he had a very difficult adoption and a very difficult life today. And the younger sister doesn't want to meet anybody. We've talked to her, and I tried to find her again in this film, and I'm just like, okay, I respect that.
And where does she live?
In Torino.
So she's still in Italy.
Yeah, we're all a 2-hour radius from Aosta.
And you're the only one who was removed from Italy and brought to the United States.
Right.
And what's the estimation of the number of children who were removed from Italy and brought to the U.S. as part of this system?
We know that there was 3,700 between 1959 and 1965.
3,700 children transported to the United States
in a 6-year period.
Wow. That's a lot.
And over the course of 20 years, we know that there's 400,000 babies throughout the world, in Australia, in Ireland, in Belgium, in Britain.
African nations, South America too. Yeah, for sure. Wow. Yeah. Unreal. So tell me about the aftermath of this reunion. You've told your adoptive mother of this adventure, and you said that there was a while where you were referring to your birth mother as the birth mother, not really giving her an identity nor really much credit in her position in your life. But it sounds like things changed for you in terms of how you viewed the entirety of the situation, and it sounds like your empathy towards her in this situation. Tell me about that evolution of how you moved from referring to her as this person over there to more of a acceptance of her position in your life. What was that about?
40 years in the making. I didn't accept her. I didn't give her a pass, really. I didn't empathize with her as a person, because reunions, as I said earlier, don't really do it. They didn't give me the answers. I still had to do the work. And it's funny because coming out as gay was hard for many reasons in an Italian Catholic family. And I knew what those were. But I dealt with this in talk therapy multiple times. I'm like, I'm done. I got that. I got it. But I didn't. It's like, it wasn't until last year and pretty close to a few months ago that I called her my birth mother, that I believed that she really was told that I died. I didn't believe her.
You didn't believe her.
I had no reason to believe her in my mind, because the church and other documentation, my alien file, all these things supported the story that they were irresponsible. Now, they certainly weren't perfect human beings, but I don't know anybody who is. I mean, they had problems and issues and money, and kids were taken, and I get it. But my question is, and people who have seen the story say, why wasn't the effort put on helping these unmarried women take care of their kids instead of the emphasis put on trafficking these kids? Because that's really what it was.
Yeah, this is a very deep component of the adoption discussion, right? Is the amount of money that is spent and the level of effort that is expended on displacing the child from their biological home to transport them to another family are the same level of resources that could be allocated toward seeing if there's a kinship adoption. If the situation necessitates such a move, could the child go from the mother to the grandmother, mother to the aunt or uncle, right? Or could the mother themselves be supported with just a couple extra dollars a month that allows for what the excuse was there wouldn't have been enough food to put on the table. Let's give them a couple more dollars for food and let's keep that family together, right? Or whatever the situation is. And I think that there's also a assumption that the future I see for that child is better than the future I see with them in that situation where they live, right? I'm assuming that I wouldn't want to live there, so I'm going to remove them and I will be part of this machine that transplants them to another place where I believe it's better. This just goes back to what you said early in our conversation. There's this assumption that your future should have been a certain way and that everybody else was in control of that narrative except for you. They were part of the machinery that separated you from your siblings and from your biological mother. And it sounds like obviously told her the lie that you were deceased. So there's a lot of effort and energy expended on putting falsehoods forward. And if the truth had remained and the person who gave birth to you was supported, you could have been in your biological family at home and had a completely different life. It's really fascinating.
But the stain of the sin would still be in their face. That is the biggest. If I look from their point of view, that trumps everything else. Because now we're supporting the immorality of unwed motherhood.
That's a really fascinating point.
We are so, I don't know if we've come any distant, but that is such a warped view of what God of any persuasion that you want would want for people. That is not my God. That is not what my God would do. My God would do exactly what you said. But because of the self-righteousness of the church at the time and the state, let's be clear. This is, I remember from the church, the triumvirate, the three components: U.S. government, Italian government, Catholic Church. Yeah, they're all culpable co-equally. So I want to be clear that who really had their hands in this, because the Marshall Plan in Italy, us helping Italy rebuild, and then all the Americans who wanted babies, who couldn't have babies, whether it's post-war sterilization or mumps or whatever things got in the way. So is Italy's way of kind of paying back for all the help it got.
Wow. I want to go back for a moment because you mentioned therapy. It sounded like you were making a almost comparison of coming out as a gay man to the challenge of overcoming your adoption trauma. Is that what I heard, that you were saying it was almost easier to come out than it was to go through this 40-year reconciliation of what had happened to me as an adopted person?
It's a realization that I've come to in the last year.
Really?
And trust me, coming out was not easy.
I was going to say, like, damn, that's a big statement.
Yeah, it was not easy at all.
Yeah.
In fact, I told my friends when I was 34, and my one close friend, she's like, yeah, we knew that. So are you okay? I'm like, why didn't you tell me? She's like,
Right.
that's not how it works.
Right.
And I wrote my parents a letter at 40, Thanksgiving Sunday, so they would receive it. And back then I wasn't here all the time. I didn't have to visit, or I moved in with my parents in 2019 to take care of them. So that was before that stuff. So I gave them a month to deal with it by Christmas when I would see them. And it was so awkward. And then by April, it was fine, right? Well, I didn't even know how this was impacting this being the adoption. For 40 years, I was in a numb state of part denial, but partly because I had no idea all these things of insecurity and abandonment and fear and loneliness and isolation and not being good enough and not being having to prove this is me, not my parents, constantly feeling like I had to prove that they made the right choice, that it wasn't a bad investment, that they got the return on their investment. If you look at it, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted from feeling like I have to pay it back, not pay it forward, pay it back.
Interesting.
And I love them, and I would have done this again and again. But I wish I knew why I was doing all these things. I wish some therapist would have had a clue. And again, I talked about anything. I'm very transparent. So I would have talked about it, but I did talk about it at times, and especially when I was going through the meeting and all that stuff. And it was, I don't know.
That's wild.
Things happen when they're supposed to, when you're ready, but goodness gracious, like it would have been a little bit easier. Could have been just a little bit easier. Is that too much to ask?
Yeah, right. Yeah. But that is, I mean, it does suggest that there would be adoption competent therapists and that you would have the outlet to even find these people. And we're only now reaching a place of people offering that level of support that is compassionate, empathetic, and understanding of the situation itself, and can put it all together and go, you might have done this because of that, and you may be feeling this way because of this.
Well,
We're only now reaching that point.
Well, and I reached out to a therapist who focuses on adoption. She's in Philly. It's like, all right, I'll drive to Philly. Or she never responded.
Wow.
It's like, are you kidding?
Yeah.
Are you kidding? Like, okay, respond and say that you don't have any space or time, but respond.
I asked Santo to go back for a moment to reflect on how it was to return to that wedding after such an emotional reunion in Aosta, Italy. He told me that it was a good thing there was such a big event for everyone to be focused on the bride and groom, so that he could turn his attention to their massive distraction, to reset and regather himself. You've heard Santo repeatedly refer to a film. He and his team made a documentary about his life as an adoptee and the experience of reunion with his first family in Italy. I asked Santo to reflect on the inspiration for the documentary and the experience retracing his steps to tell his story.
It's called Il Mio Posto a Tavola. It means this is my place at the table. And it was so I titled it as such because everything happens at the table in Italian family. It's not just Italian, but we don't have a market on it, but I think we do it best. Screaming, yelling,
Pretty good at it.
Screaming, yelling, fighting, celebrating, happiness, joy, all that takes place at the table. And so as I said, I moved back home. I was only like 15 minutes away, but I moved back to my house where I grew up and where my parents were still living. In 2019, my dad at that time had Parkinson's for about 15 years. My mom was on dialysis. She had a couple occurrences of cancer. And June 28th, 2019, she broke her ankle. And so dad was home and had to be, so like they couldn't be alone. So she was in rehab after surgery. And then I moved back, me and Raphael, my dog, Rafi. He was a flat-coated retriever. And I trained him as a therapy dog, go figure, right?
Yeah.
Not enough that I'm trying to be the helping person.
Yeah.
So we would go back and forth every couple of days to get his food or get more clothes, but I never slept in my house again after that day. So mom made the choice to stop dialysis. And I had to respect that. And I was like, well, you know what that means? She's like, I'm not stupid. I know what that means. And a couple of days later, I said, it's still not too late if you change your mind. No, I don't want, because the cancer had reoccurred and the dialysis was not awful. She was more sick than she had ever been because of this cancer in her stomach. She passed right before COVID in February 12th of 2020. So I was definitely staying, obviously, because Dad was he could walk a little bit, but mostly in a wheelchair. And we had a caregiver who helped me, who was our angel, and still is close. And so Dad passed in 21, May 21st of 21. So we had a year of no trauma, nothing terrible. Me and the dog did some remodeling at the house because I was going to stay here, and I sold my house. I think once my dad knew that I was here and I was okay, he stopped trying. It was just too hard because by that time it was like 18 years of Parkinson's.
He'd also lost his wife. A lot of times when people lose their life partner, there's like not a whole lot more for them to live for, they feel. Right?
They were married 69 years.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So June of 2023, my dog developed this terrible trigeminal neuritis, which he got ulcers in his eyes. He couldn't feel his mouth. He couldn't move his mouth. And we got him better. I got him better. I made food and hold his mouth because he couldn't chew. So he was losing all this weight. And I'm like, what the heck? Got through that. And then something happened. He got a relapse. And of course I took him to the hospital. It wasn't a question of if I was going to get treatment. It was going to be like, how do I pay for this? We'll figure it out. I'll teach another class. I'll do something. And I had to do the thing that you have to do when you really love your pet. So I had to let him go August 18th of 2023. So in 3 years, a little over 3 years, I had lost what I call my everyday family. I was gone. And dark places emerged. And I was probably the worst place I've been my entire life. But I tried to do the right things. I started volunteering at the shelter for animals and taking dogs on their walks. I went back to talk therapy. I talked to people. It's like, it didn't help. It just didn't help. I think by November, I was like, I can't stay in this place. So I decided, all right, the only way I'm going to get out of this. So I joined a grief group. I ramped up the talk therapy, and I made 3 promises to myself. I took myself to New York on Christmas. And I have really good friends who are family, but I didn't want to be with anybody. In New York, where theater for me, I love theater. I do a lot of theater. I do a lot of film. But I was like, all right, I'm going to do 3 things. I'm going to have like a fundraiser at the shelter on Rafi's birthday in February. I had a play, 5 little plays that I wrote from the pandemic on, because we were all being creative because we had time. And then I'm going to put that up in the spring. And I'm finally going to put that together and do something with that. And the third thing I'm going to do is tell the story. And over the years, I was like, I wrote a treatment for a screenplay. I wrote a theater play. I wrote it as a talk. I wrote it as a book. It's like, I couldn't find the right.
So you were searching for the right medium, and you landed on a documentary.
My director, who's been a collaborator for 16 years, she and I had worked on things, and I called her. I'm like, I have this weird idea. I told her, and I'm like, I think the medium is doc, and I think you're the director. And she's like, yeah, I like it. I think we should do it. And I'm like, huh? Like, we have to go to Italy, and we have to be here, and we have to go there. She's like, yeah, I get it. So that was December of 23, January 24. Went to Italy in last September, and then finished final cut a few weeks back in April, and then now the fun part of distribution goes.
That's really incredible. Congratulations, man. It must be really fulfilling to have made something so meaningful to yourself, but also that will be a highlight for the community to attach to. You've said at least 3,700 kids out there who potentially could identify with your story should they ever get a chance to be connected with it. And there are people the world over who are going to understand more about what that international adoption machinery looks like, at least from the Italian perspective, and therefore can identify it to themselves. So tell us again, what is the name of the film?
Il Mio Posto a Tavola, my place at the table. And we had the screening, and we had, of course, it was a captive audience, it was friends and supporters, but the thoughtfulness around the reactions and the feedback tells me that what my hope was that it was going to extend beyond the adoption community, although that's our first target, but to this sense of we all have a need to belong. And whatever the obstacle that has been in our way, for us, for me, it was adoption, but there's many things that get in the way of our feeling like we belong. And we need to address that. You don't have to make a film about it, but we need to confront it, and you can do it. If I can do this with this, we can all do this.
Agreed. 100%. Santos, thank you so much for being here, man. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you for your thoughtful questions. It really got me thinking in different ways. So thank you for that.
Absolutely my pleasure, Santo. You've been amazing, and I'm so glad for your healing. It sounds like that was a really tough 3 years, but to have turned it into creativity, which I often encourage people to do.
Yeah.
If you're sitting there with your story inside your body, you're the only one there thinking about it. You're the only one mulling it over. Nobody's there telling you, don't think that's crazy, right? Because you haven't gotten it out. So get the stuff out of your body. Write it, write a song, sing it, document it, write a poem, be on podcasts, whatever. But tell your story so that you can start to have someone else, as you've said, ask some questions that are going to have you start to think about things in a different way. So I appreciate you being here, Santo. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Take care, buddy. All the best. Hey, it's me. Santo grew up with the adoptee loyalty many of us feel towards our adoptive parents, but he said he was exhausted from trying to make his parents feel like he had been a good investment. I was struck by Santo's comment that coming out as a gay man was less challenging than reconciling what being an adoptee meant for his life. His words are a stark and clear reminder that adoption is a lifelong experience that requires hard work to navigate successfully. But the work doesn't fall solely on the adoptee. It is work that must be done by the adoptive parents and families. First, families preparing themselves for a potential reunion, and requires support from therapists, friends, and our support systems. Santo's documentary about his personal journey is called Il Mio Posto a Tavola, or My Place at the Table. Santo granted me access to view his story, and it's very moving. It shows research into his own story as one thread in the mosaic of thousands of children who were extracted from Italy and other European countries for adoption into the United States. The documentary is making the rounds through the film festival circuit, so Santo invites you to learn more about it and watch the official film trailer at ilmiopostofilm.com. That's ILMIOPOSTO film.com. And let me leave you with one more thing that I learned from his film. Santo sits down with a bishop of the Catholic Church to explain and explore his past. The bishop quoted Pope Francis, who said, "Forgiveness can't change the past, but it can change the future." I thought those were profound words for the adoptee community as we work to heal ourselves and move forward from our past. I'm Damon Davis, and I hope you found something in Santo's journey that inspired you, validates your feelings about wanting to search, or motivates you to have the strength along your journey to learn, who am I really? How does it feel to be adopted? What does it mean to search for your origins? Adoption is a life-altering experience for everyone involved, but for adoptees, the question of identity is never simple. It's a lifelong journey shaped by mystery, longing, and sometimes profound discoveries. I've spent the last 8 years listening to over 250 adopted people from all walks of life and around the world who share their adoption stories. People who lived through, thrived, and merely survived adoption, many of whom dared to search for their biological roots. Some found long-lost family, others uncovered unexpected truths, still others found no answers at all. But all of them shared raw, unfiltered stories of resilience, identity, and self-discovery. Now, their voices come together in my new book, The Adoptee Experience. Inside the cover, you'll find what adoptees experience in their adopted families, why so many of us feel compelled to search, and the deep emotions that drive us. How fantasies about birth parents shape our expectations before adoption reunion. The role of DNA testing, access to records, and other tools that impact adoptee searches. And the emotional roller coaster of attempting adoption reunions to reconcile the past, whether the journey brings joy, heartbreak, or something in between. The Adoptee Experience isn't just a book, it's a reflection of what it really means to be adopted. If you've ever wondered about your own identity, or you want to understand the adoptee journey, this book is for you. Please take a moment to visit whoamireallypodcast.com/adoptee experience. Again, whoamireallypodcast.com/adoptee experience to stay up to date on the book's progress.